The Dean J. Television Show. Hosted by Dean Robinson. And now, Dean Robinson.
Commercial media networks and the departments and agencies of the United States of America promote U.S. world wars as foreign policy in Africa and the Middle East, even though world wars kill people by the millions while contributing to the everlasting refugee crisis. Local TV stations could report the truth about U.S. world wars, but they're not. Ask any TV station news director about U.S. world wars, and they'll tell you about how the network covers that stuff. They'll tell you about how U.S. world wars are not local stories, even though local TV stations produce local feel-good stories about local soldiers returning home from these U.S. world wars to their local wives and local children. The networks and the departments and agencies produce glamorized war reenactments and fictionalized combat scenarios as commercial motion picture entertainment. Most modern superhero movies are full-scale war movies. Hollywood wars are limited only by imagination. The known universe can't contain Hollywood wars. Corporate sponsors commit dollars by the billions to commercial media networks for advertising movies, product pitches, political candidates, and limited one-time offers year after year. Objectivity has no place in a commercial news environment that favors editorial commentary and celebrity opinions over journalism on so many regularly scheduled programs. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, Raytheon and BAE Systems earn dollars by the billions each year from U.S. military contracts. Fort Wayne TV stations could talk about U.S. world wars and the economy in Fort Wayne, jobs, 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 and taxation for war spending, but they're not. In 2016, President Barack Obama ordered military strikes in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, and Syria. In 2017, President Donald Trump ordered military strikes in the exact same 7 nations. Representative Jim Banks, the Indiana Republican representing the 3rd District in Washington, D.C., doesn't talk about how much U.S. world wars cost Indiana families in blood and money. Jim Banks has not joined Representative Tulsi Gabbard's opposition to U.S. intervention in Syria and support for terrorist groups. Gabbard, the Democrat from Hawaii, in December 2016 introduced a bill called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act that bans U.S. funding and assistance to terrorists like the so-called rebel militias committing crimes against humanity in Syria. Jim Banks has not expressed support for the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. With the exception of Tulsi Gabbard and a few others, the Republican and Democratic parties in Washington, D.C. are on the same page when it comes to U.S. world wars. Just like the populace at large, Congress is largely ambivalent when it comes to U.S. world wars in 7 Middle Eastern and African nations. Overthrowing governments in Africa and the Middle East by sponsoring local rebel militias has been official U.S. foreign policy ever since the United States and Great Britain conducted Operation Ajax to overthrow Iran's democratically elected prime minister in 1953. Celebrity conservative commentator Mark Levin promotes U.S. aggression and regime change in Syria as logical foreign policy on radio stations across the country, including WOWO AM in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Even though President Trump has already ordered missile strikes in 7 countries, Mark Levin says the United States should assassinate North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un with China's help. Through his abject fear, Mark Levin somehow musters the courage to call Kim Jong-un Kim Jong-Fat Boy. WOWO AM conservative capitalist Christian personality Pat Miller says Mark Levin is a genius. Pat Miller does not want Indiana Catholics to help Syrian war refugees in the United States because he's afraid they may be terrorists who want to kill Americans. Pat Miller does not talk about the United States giving weapons to the Free Syrian Army that they in turn gave to al-Nusra Front, the rebel militia ally to the Free Syrian Army that is considered a terrorist group by the United States. Miller condemns Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for an alleged chemical attack on Syrian civilians that has been debunked by rational people like libertarian commentator Ron Paul, the former Republican U.S. representative from Texas. Miller praises President Trump for military strikes on Syrian government targets, even though Syria has not attacked the United States of America and Congress has not declared war on Syria. The U.S. Navy shot down a Syrian fighter jet that was targeting Syrian enemies who are considered allies to the United States in Syria. The U.S. military is attacking Syria to protect enemies of Syria in the Syrian civil war. The Trump administration encourages regime change in Syria by supporting mercenaries who are fighting to depose Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Commercial media networks and the departments and agencies of the United States of America promote U.S. world wars as proper foreign policy, even though the policy kills human beings by the millions. The Washington death cult wages U.S. world wars in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, and Syria, while most citizens in the United States barely notice. That's because U.S. citizens are among the most propagandized people on the planet. Time for Summit City Noise News. First, we go to the Washington Post. Headline: Trump ends covert CIA program to arm anti-Assad rebels in Syria, a move sought by Moscow. President Trump has decided to end the CIA's covert program to arm and train moderate Syrian rebels battling the government of Bashar al-Assad, according to U.S. officials. The program was a central plank of a policy begun by the Obama administration in 2013 to put pressure on Assad to step aside. But even its backers have questioned its efficacy since Russia deployed forces in Syria 2 years later. The decision on the CIA-backed rebels will be welcomed by Moscow, which focused its firepower on those fighters after it intervened in Syria in 2015. The decision will not affect a separate Pentagon-led effort to work with U.S.-backed Syrian rebels fighting the Islamic State. A major problem with going steady with militias in the Middle East has always been the end of the relationship. That's why President Trump will continue funding Middle Eastern militias in Syria. President Ronald Reagan armed and trained the Afghan holy warriors for their battles to suppress the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan throughout the 1980s. When the holy warriors achieved victory, the group splintered into the Afghan Taliban and Al-Qaeda, also known as the Base or the Foundation, led by holy warrior fundraiser and Saudi Arabian native Osama bin Laden. The Independent, survivors of 9/11 attack, urged Theresa May to release Saudi Arabia terror report she suppressed. A group representing U.S. survivors of the 9/11 attacks and the relatives of some of the almost 3,000 people who died has urged British Prime Minister Theresa May to seize the chance to make public a British government report into the extent of Saudi Arabia's funding of Islamist extremism in the UK. The UK now has the unique historic opportunity to stop the killing spree of Wahhabism-inspired terrorists by releasing the UK government's report on terrorism financing in the UK, which, according to media reports, places Saudi Arabia at its center of culpability, says the letter signed by 15 people. Sharon Promoli, one of the authors of the letter, was on the 80th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center when the first Al-Qaeda plane struck and rushed to safety. Promoli says the U.S. government was actively involved in a cover-up of Saudi Arabia's role. 9/11 could not have happened without Saudi Arabia's support for Al-Qaeda, says Jim Kreindler, the lead lawyer in a lawsuit filed in New York on behalf of the families of 850 individuals who were killed and 1,500 who were injured. Saudi Arabia and Iran served as the twin pillars of U.S. military influence in the Middle East during the Nixon administration, which ended with President Nixon's resignation in 1974. Iranian citizens ended Iran's reluctant partnership with the United States by deposing the Shah in 1979. 15 of the 19 al-Qaeda hijackers who destroyed the Twin Towers on 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia, the lone remaining twin pillar. Portland Press Herald. Senator Collins says Indiana's plan to expand Medicaid could be a model for Maine. Senator Susan Collins touted the Medicaid expansion in Indiana as a possible model for Maine. State governments decide whether to expand Medicaid, and Maine is among the 19 states that have not done so. I think Indiana came up with a good plan, the Republicans said. If Maine does decide to expand Medicaid, a good model for Maine to consider would be the Indiana model. Maine Governor Paul LePage has steadfastly opposed Medicaid expansion and has vetoed several bills passed by the legislature calling for expansion. Collins says her goal is for more people to become insured, not fewer, and that's one of the major reasons why she is against the American Health Care Act, a bill to replace the Affordable Care Act that was approved by the Republican-controlled House. Collins says she also objects to how the American Health Care Act would be much more expensive for older, rural people in the 50 to 64 age group, with premiums expected to rise by as much as 800%, according to the Congressional Budget Office analysis of the bill. Indiana, with a Republican House, Senate, and governor, has emerged as the model of success for Obamacare Medicaid expansion. How odd! Forbes. The Nintendo Switch Online app is as terrible in practice as it was in theory. With the launch of Splatoon 2 comes the release of Nintendo's long-awaited online service app, which uses your phone to set up voice chat and party play for Nintendo's online offerings. The initial reaction when Nintendo announced that their online service would be run through a phone app was confusion. And it turns out that what seemed like a bad idea is actually a pretty bad idea, at least with how the app currently functions. Someday in the future, people will slowly begin to understand Nintendo hates online gaming. They can't stand that stuff. Nintendo wants people to play games together, locally, in pairs, and in groups. It will be a glorious day. Israel police are currently investigating Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for allegedly conspiring with a newspaper publisher to stifle a competing newspaper that is considered a pro-Netanyahu publication. There are two more major Israel police investigations into Netanyahu within this story, which should be a bigger deal considering it involves the Israeli Prime Minister, graft, corruption, commercial news in Israel, submarine contracts, and 3 billionaires, including a Las Vegas casino magnate, an Israeli super spy turned Hollywood movie mega producer, and Mariah Carey's ex-boyfriend. Somehow, commercial media companies in the United States still don't believe the Big Bibi corruption marathon has lasted long enough to be considered a serious event. Yet.
Haaretz headline: Sheldon Adelson's pro-Netanyahu daily cuts circulation. Is billionaire Sheldon Adelson beginning to cut back on his investment in Israel Hayom, the free newspaper considered the mouthpiece of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Since the 2015 elections, when Adelson was apparently helping Netanyahu, the newspaper was printing 550,000 copies on weekends. It ceased publishing its weekend circulation numbers in January, and it now refuses to confirm how many issues it prints on weekends. The drop in circulation follows deterioration in relations between Israel Hayom editor Amos Regev and the Prime Minister's office. However, observers say there is a more significant break between Netanyahu and Adelson. The latest storm around the revelation of tape-recorded conversations between Netanyahu and Yedioth Ahronoth publisher Arnon Moses likely deepened the crisis. The tapes revealed that Netanyahu was trying to reach an arrangement to limit the circulation of Israel Hayom, or the number of ads in the newspaper, in exchange for positive coverage in Yedioth Ahronoth. The Jerusalem Post headline: Secret recordings reveal details of Netanyahu newspaper corruption case. Excerpts from the conversation illustrate the moves the two were planning. What's the bottom line? How can we do this quickly? We can legislate it. Here, the Prime Minister referred to legislation in 2014 termed the Israel-Hayim Bill, which sought to end the paper's free distribution. The bill did not become law. Netanyahu then allegedly stated that he would ask Israel-Hayim owner Sheldon Adelson, who he referred to as the Gingy, or redhead, if such a law was acceptable to him. I want to be able to speak with Dick Gingy. He'll be in Israel in 2 weeks. We need to see how to do something he can live with. Maybe a different law. I want to make it easier, not more difficult. Benjamin Netanyahu was serving both as Israel's prime minister and communications minister when he and Moses discussed the newspaper plot to manipulate Israeli news in 2014. Sputnik. Headline: Netanyahu leaves communication minister post amid corruption investigation. Isaac Herzog of the Zionist Union Party requested in January that the Israeli Supreme Court require Benjamin Netanyahu to resign from the position of communications minister that Netanyahu held alongside his role as prime minister. Recordings obtained by the Attorney General of Israel purport to document that Moses gave good coverage of Netanyahu during the 2015 election in exchange for Netanyahu's help in curtailing the circulation of the Yediot's #1 competitor, the free daily Israel Hayim. The Hayim's owner, Sheldon Adelson, is a Las Vegas casino magnate, billionaire, and Trump supporter who provides financial support for the Zionist Organization of America and the Republican Jewish Coalition. Politico. Headline: Jewish Republicans torn over Trump. The most prominent group of Jewish Republican donors in the country gathered at Sheldon Adelson's lavish Venetian hotel this weekend. Adelson, who spent more than $100 million over the past 2 election cycles to get a Republican-elected commander-in-chief, including tens of millions on Trump's behalf, was present throughout the weekend event. Looking to have a presence at the Republican Jewish Coalition, the White House dispatched Trump spokesman Boris Epstein, a Russian-born Jewish immigrant, to Las Vegas for the weekend gathering. Behind the scenes, the White House is taking steps to win over Republican Jews, a small but influential group. It has enlisted the 83-year-old Adelson, whose estimated $30 billion net worth has made him one of the Republican Party's most sought-after donors, as an unofficial advisor. In March 2014, Sheldon Adelson, Kate Hudson, Barbara Streisand, James Caan, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Keanu Reeves attended a party honoring Benjamin Netanyahu at the Malibu seaside estate owned by Arnon Milchan. Milchan is the Oscar-winning Hollywood producer behind more than 100 major movies, including The Revenant, Pretty Woman, Gone Girl, LA Confidential, Heat, Natural Born Killers, Fight Club, and Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Road Chip. Milchan is also a former Israeli intelligence operative and the subject of the 2011 book by Meir Doran and Joseph Gelman called Confidential: The Life of a Secret Agent Turned Hollywood Tycoon. The Hollywood Reporter. Headline: Mogul Arnon Milchan questioned in Israel's Netanyahu probe. An Israeli police official says Israeli investigators questioned Hollywood producer Arnon Milchan in the U.S. last week as part of a corruption investigation into Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The police official spoke Tuesday on condition of anonymity in line with police regulations. The Netanyahus are said to have received more than $100,000 worth of cigars and liquor from Milchan. Netanyahu denies any wrongdoing. The investigation, dubbed File 1000, reportedly concerns claims that Netanyahu improperly accepted lavish gifts from wealthy supporters, including Milchan and Australian billionaire James Packer. People. Headline: 5 things to know about Mariah Carey's billionaire ex, James Packer. 1. He is very, 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 very wealthy. According to Forbes, Packer is estimated to be worth $4.7 billion. He went on to become the chairperson of Crown Limited, a giant gaming, entertainment, and resort group in Australia. He is estimated to be the 4th richest person in Australia. His father is the late media mogul Kerry Francis Bullmore Packer. Australian Broadcasting Corporation News. Headline: James Packer wanted for questioning by Israeli police in Netanyahu corruption probe. The Australian Federal Police told the ABC they did not discuss assistance requests from other countries, but that the agency works closely with its international counterparts to investigate and prosecute allegations of corruption. Netanyahu has been questioned 4 times by police in relation to the corruption probe and allegedly receiving inappropriate and undeclared gifts. Netanyahu has described James Packer as a good friend. The relationship between one of Australia's richest men and the Prime Minister of Israel can be traced back to a star-studded dinner held in Netanyahu's honor in March 2014. The evening's host was Hollywood producer and Israeli billionaire businessman Arnon Milchan. Mr. Milchan was the guy who brought James Packer to Israel, who introduced him to the Prime Minister. Raviv Drucker, one of Israel's most high-profile investigative journalists, told 730. Milchan knew Mr. Packer's father, so they are very close. Packer soon became part of the pack. Milchan was already part of a close circle of billionaires Netanyahu surrounded himself with.
The star-studded Malibu house party for Benjamin Netanyahu, hosted by Arnon Milchan in 2014, was attended by Sheldon Adelson.
Jewish Telegraphic Agency headline: Sheldon Adelson may be deposed in Netanyahu corruption investigation. Jewish American billionaire Sheldon Adelson may be questioned in connection with a corruption investigation of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli media reported. Army Radio quoted an Adelson spokesman as saying that a request had not yet been made to question Adelson. The reports about Adelson come on the heels of other reports that Israeli billionaire Arnon Milchan, a filmmaker who lives in Los Angeles, gave testimony to Israeli police that supports indicting the prime minister. Milchan reportedly later walked back that testimony. Police investigators have reportedly contacted authorities in the United States to obtain a deposition from Adelson, a Las Vegas gaming magnate and the owner of the Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom. The investigation is looking into allegations Netanyahu and Arnon Moses, publisher of the daily Yediot Asharonot, discussed a deal in which Netanyahu would receive favorable coverage in Yediot in exchange for legislation that would cut into the circulation of Sheldon Adelson's paper. Financial Times headline: Netanyahu and his friends caught in the spotlight. Potentially more serious is a Justice Ministry probe into alleged corruption around military procurement of boats and submarines, which was upgraded to a full criminal investigation last week. Netanyahu has not been named as a suspect in the affair, but investigators are said to be looking at whether he played a role in the cancellation of a tender for 4 Navy patrol boats, business that was then awarded to a unit of ThyssenKrupp, the German conglomerate. The scandal broke after it emerged late last year that David Shimron, the Prime Minister's family lawyer and second cousin, also represents a local sales representative for ThyssenKrupp's Marine Systems subsidiary. 3 probes, called Case 1000, Case 2000, and Case 3000 by police, have dominated headlines since November and brought calls by opposition lawmakers for Mr. Netanyahu to resign.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is the leading member of the right-wing Likud party in Israel. The Likud party held a meeting in Hadera, Israel on Wednesday, March 15, 2017.
The Jerusalem Post headline: Candidates preparing for a post-Netanyahu era that might not be near. Netanyahu's fight with Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon over the Israeli Broadcasting Corporation took center stage as the Prime Minister called for its formation to be delayed again, and Kahlon refused. After it has become clear that Netanyahu initiated the last election over a bill intended to harm his favorite newspaper, Israel Hayom, even such a small issue could cause an election in Israel. The gift-accepting affair, the problematic negotiations with a newspaper owner, and the submarine scandal have all given politicians who see themselves as future prime ministers new hope that Netanyahu will not keep his job forever. The investigations are expected to lead to a police recommendation to indict the prime minister sometime next month. A police recommendation for an indictment does not mean that Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit will accept the request.
Israel police are trying to determine whether or not Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu improperly received gifts worth tens of thousands of dollars from billionaire businessmen who are major players in the U.S. entertainment industry. Israel police are also trying to determine whether or not Communications Minister Benjamin Netanyahu conspired to manipulate commercial news media in Israel. Additionally, Israel police are trying to determine whether or not Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu awarded a military construction contract to a personal business associate. I think this story is a big deal, a Joe Biden big deal. But I have to admit, the Jerusalem Post knows way better than me when they say there is still a long way to go before Netanyahu's investigations become serious. No amount of Mariah Carey walking away is going to change that.
Have I told you how sorry I am? Yeah, got to apologize, to the world, to everybody, I fell down, now I got to tell you about everything, all the sex and golf, you got to know about it, for that sex I had, straying from Buddhism. I gotta get back to that stuff. I gotta grab it by the leg and hold on. Oh yeah, I'm sorry y'all, gotta say it to ya. Did you hear me now? I'm sorry, I apologize. Nike, I'm sorry, y'all. EA Sports, Electronic Arts, I'm sorry to you. PS3, Nintendo Wii, Microsoft, Xbox 360. I'm very, very sorry now, Gatorade. You quench my thirst so much better than H2O. It's better than that. So give my body what it needs so I don't need all that sex. It's not like I'm David Duchovny out here. I ain't no Charlie Sheen, no. All I need is 18 holes, that's all. I only need 18 holes. And oh, I was so close to 18 holes, the 18 holes, Get hip to what's happening in the world with the Dean J Television Show every Saturday at 5 p.m. on Access Fort Wayne 2, right before the Fort Report with News-Sentinel writer Kevin Leininger. The Dean J Television Show presents news, social commentary, music, and entertainment from Summit City Noise producer Dean Robinson, also known as Summit City music recording artist Dean J. Watch the Dean J Television Show every Saturday at 5 p.m. right before the Fort Report with News-Sentinel writer Kevin Leininger on Access Fort Wayne 2. Access Fort Wayne 2 is Comcast Channel 57 and Frontier Channel 27. Consult your local TV listings, Facebook, and YouTube for the Dean J Television Show.